Oh, I'm pixelated again. Kia ora, folks. Here for chat. And I don't know what we're going to do, whether you're going to be okay looking at my face like that. I don't know whether the sound's coming through okay, but let's give it a try. So the purpose of this show is to explain some of the science behind COVID-19 and answer your questions. Today is the 8th of April. We're on day 14 of lockdown here in New Zealand. And I'd like to introduce you to Damien, who's wrangling all the questions. Damien.
Hello, how are you? We're very pixely, aren't we, today? But that's all right. We've got a new modem, and
we're very pixely today.
Very pixely. That's all right. We all know. I'm pretty sure everyone out there knows what you look like by now, don't you? Don't you think? Can't hear me.
Oh,
okay.
And I've even can't hear Damien.
Through?
Oh my goodness! Talk about technology problems.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. Can anyone else hear me? Is everyone else hearing me? Ben, can you hear me? Yep. Let's see if we can hear. If you can hear me, Ben, back in the control room. Let's put the email address up here now. nzcovid@gmail.com. That's where we can send people's questions to if they've got questions. We've got over a couple of hundred questions coming in so far, so people have got lots of questions for you. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can a little bit later in the show. Siouxsie, if you can hear me, hopefully you can, then maybe we can
start, with,
look at today's figures.
Yeah, let's look at today's figures. So we have got 50 new cases today here in New Zealand. Can we show our new cases, Ben? Oh, goodness me. Here we go, new cases. And what's really awesome is we can see them dropping. So that's the third day in the row that our cases have dropped, and actually a huge number of tests have been done. So apparently it was about 4,000 yesterday. So this is looking really good. But remember, New Zealand, do not get complacent. We need to stay in our bubbles. That's what's really important if we're going to keep these case numbers low. In terms of our totals, let's have a look at that graph, Ben. We're up at now 1,210 cases. The Director General of Health today said that there are 12 people in hospital, 4 in ICU, 2 of those are critical. So we really are sending our best thoughts and wishes to all of those families and to those patients, and hope they make a speedy recovery. As for globally, let's take a look at what's going on around the world. And we're up at 1.4 million cases now. If we look at the Johns Hopkins track. Is that one coming up? There it is, 1.428 million cases. And again, that will be a massive underestimate because many countries are not even testing all cases of COVID-19. Anyway, let's get on to today's which we have, so people have been asking how should they stay safe in their bubbles. And so I thought, how about I tell you how I'm staying safe in my bubble. So my bubble is a complicated bubble. There are just 3 of us in the bubble, and none of us have got any underlying health issues or anything like that family. So what are we doing? We are not seeing anybody else, basically. It's just the 3 of us in our bubble. We are keeping in touch with our friends and family and neighbors using the phone, texting, using Zoom and all of those kinds of things. So we are staying basically to ourselves, which is the thing that we're supposed to be doing. So no, parties down the bottom of our driveway, none of that kind of thing. If we've seen the neighbors, it's been very brief, like a 30-second high, and that's what you need to do to stay safe in your bubble. We've only been going out to go to the supermarket about once a week, and just one person has been doing that. We've basically, every time we've left the house, we've made sure that we wash our hands. We wash our hands when we come straight back in again. In terms of our groceries, we have so most of the things that enter our house, I mean, it's absolutely fine. There's very little chance that there'll be any virus on them. What are we doing? We are leaving things that don't need to be brought into the house straight away. We're just leaving them for a few days downstairs. But we're not washing anything or doing anything like that. We're not washing our fruit and veg or anything like that. And that's mainly because, we're here in New Zealand. There is very little chance of there being virus on other things, like things from the supermarket. But also we don't have anybody vulnerable in our bubble. My mum and dad are in the UK, and the UK is a very different situation. There have got lots more people with COVID-19, many of whom are probably undiagnosed and still going about their business. And my mum is somebody who would be very vulnerable to infection. So my parents are being very diligent. Again, not letting any things for a few days before anybody touches them. The really important thing is that we are all washing our hands really regularly. We're washing them after we've been out of the house, and we don't touch our faces, although I know that is very hard. The other thing that I'm doing in terms of getting out of the house is just going for a daily bike ride. And so again, it's just I leave the house on my bicycle. I don't stop anywhere. I come back and I still wash my hands after I've done that. So that's how I'm staying safe in my bubble. And I would hope that you are doing the same. So we're going to go to the questions now, but I think that I might ask the questions myself because we're having such problems with the pictures and stuff. So the first question is, let me get to the first question, is on remember again is nzcovid@gmail.com. So the questions for today. The first one's from Araha, and that asks, does beeswax contain antibacterial and antiviral properties? And if so, would wearing a beeswax wrap be a good alternative to use as a face mask? That is a great question. I'm going to say no straight away. The first thing to remember is that face masks are about protecting you and not protecting you from others. But I did look into this. So does beeswax have something that could be antiviral in it? And the answer is, well, potentially. So I found a research paper that tested the effect of propolis on the chickenpox virus. So this is something that is inside of beeswax, and often it's extracted from beeswax to be able to used as a kind of health supplement. So this particular thing was found, and it did have some activity against the chickenpox virus, but they needed an awful lot of it. So that would suggest that in a beeswax wrap, there won't be enough to actually do anything. And as I say, the masks are about protecting others from you and not you from the virus. The next question is from Jenny. Is using povidone iodine gargle, otherwise known as betadine, a way of preventing COVID-19 infection in the throat? I read it kills coronaviruses. Again, this is a really good question. Again, let's talk about whether you would use it to prevent infection versus actually reduce the amount of virus that you might be shedding that could infect someone else. So I did do a quick search of the literature, and I found a research article from 2015 that actually tested this povidone iodine against the MERS coronavirus. And so this was done in the lab. It was taking the virus and then adding this solution to it at different concentrations, and then seeing whether there was enough virus there that still had activity that could infect cells. And so what they did show was that this did have some antiviral activity. So it did reduce the amount of virus that was present and able to infect the next lot of cells. In fact, the authors suggest you could use it as a hand wash. So maybe it would be able to reduce the virus on hands. They did say that it could potentially use for gargling, but I don't think this is a good idea and hasn't been shown. So I think that if you were using this to protect you, I think it would lull you into a false sense of security. So it may well be that if you had the virus, it would be able to reduce some of it so that you weren't as infectious. As for using it to wash your hands, I think you're still better off using soap and water. Okay, several people have asked, does freezing destroy the virus? Is it safe to put stuff you've bought in the freezer? A good question. So I did a search for this. I did read somewhere a microbiologist from overseas saying that coronaviruses could survive for up to 2 years in the freezer. So that would suggest that this doesn't work. I haven't actually been able to find the study that they were referencing. What I did find was one that took cells infected with the SARS coronavirus. So this is not this particular coronavirus, and fixed those cells to a microscope slide using lots of different techniques. And then they popped these slides in the freezer for a few days. And then, so up to, I think, about 3 days. And then they took those slides out, scraped the cells off, and then tried to see whether they could get infectious virus particles out of those cells at the end of that experiment. We've been joined by the cat, and she's going to start eating the plant. Well, hopefully she won't tip it over. Anyway, so what they found was that those cells did have infectious virus particles in them. Just been subjected to a whole bunch of other things, like shoved in ethanol, shoved in all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to say that yes, it can survive in the freezer, and just put the things that you want to put in the freezer rather than everything. Don't think that that will solve your problem. Okay, the next question from Eileen. Has there been any more research looking at the likelihood of getting symptoms depending on your blood type? Another great question. So this is because a recent study that hasn't yet been peer reviewed, so it's appeared online, looked at the blood types of just over 2,000 patients who had COVID-19 across 3 different hospitals in China, and then compared those, so how many had what blood type, with several thousand patients that didn't have COVID-19 in the same hospitals. And what they reported was that in two of those hospitals, there were more people with blood group A compared to O for COVID-19 patients. And so that made them think, oh, well, maybe if you had blood group A, you were more likely to get an infection, or it was going to be a more severe infection. But the third hospital found no difference. So this is an observational study done of a very small number of patients. And I think there are lots of other parameters that they could have looked at that might have given them another potential, oh, it's this that could be related. The fact that there are now over 1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, we've got much better numbers now to see whether this was just a statistical blip. And so this is something I'm sure that will be looked at when people are analyzing what parameters differentiate the people with COVID-19, or even if you have a more severe case of COVID-19 compared to not over time. So watch this space. A question from Julia. We'll do this last question from Julia, I think. Is a cure or vaccine the only way forward? What about effective treatments and drugs? Well, you're absolutely right. So vaccines are how we prevent infection, and they're absolutely what we want because we do want to try and prevent infections. But you're right, treatments are really important for those people who have the disease when we don't have a vaccine. Have a vaccine for, 18 months or so. And that's why lots of different treatments are being tried. So we talked about this in the last episode, that there are 161 trials currently registered of different things that have been tried. Not 161 things, but lots of different things. Things from antibodies, from blood from former patients, things for recovered people, antiviral treatments, all sorts of things. So you're absolutely right. Treatments are important, and they are one of the things that are being looked at compared as well as potential vaccines. So I think that's probably enough from me for today. Let's get Damien back, and thank you so much for all of your questions.
I just thought we'd wrap up the show a little bit earlier today, just because we are having those issues with Siouxsie got a new modem, and she was very excited about having much better internet at home, and clearly there's a few issues there, and we did try turning it on and turning it off again before people start suggesting that as an option. So I just want to thank the Science Media Centre for supporting us and helping us do this and pay the bills and keep the lights on. And thanks to our media partners who are streaming this live as well. We will be back on Friday at around about this time, 4:10 p.m. So keep your questions coming in to nzcovid@gmail.com. Thank you, Siouxsie, once again for giving us your time. And I thought we'd leave you with, I don't know, just one of those myriad ways that people are finding to get creative and entertain themselves when they're stuck inside. 2 weeks now, folks. You're doing well. Keep it up. See you soon. See ya.